Hi, my name's Dr. Angela Riccobono, and I want to welcome everyone to our November Nancy Talk. So tonight this afternoon, we have Eli Kulp. Eli is a James Beard nominated chef who became quadriplegic in an Amtrak derailment back in 2015. And it was about that time that we met and started our own journey together. And I have this memory of, I don't even know if you're going to remember this, but it was in the pre-pandemic days when we actually had a support group called Transitions in person. And you would come to that, and we were sitting in this circle, because therapists like circles. And I think the topic was how to manage your home attendant, or like how to deal with your home attendant. And people were like understandably expressing like frustration about having to depend on other people, having to wait when you ask for things. Just in general, this feeling of asking for help being like the most difficult thing that there is. Just this loss of autonomy. And then we get to Eli, and he says in this very calm voice, without my home attendant, I would die. I wouldn't be able to eat myself. I wouldn't be able to go to the bathroom. I wouldn't be able to dress myself. I wouldn't be able to get out of bed and get in my chair. I would literally die. And the room got really quiet. And all of a sudden, it was like this big perspective change about gratitude. And it was about like gratitude for the people in your life that are there for you when you really need them. And it was like in that moment, like of intense humility and vulnerability, that I knew Eli was going to be okay.
I don't remember that. Sounds like I totally ruined the vibe.
No, you actually totally enhanced the vibe, because it like presented this whole other perspective. Instead of just being frustrated by having to ask for help, it was just recognizing that we all need help sometimes, and to be grateful for the people that are there for us when we need them. So I think it gave people like an increased awareness and, of a broader perspective.
Well, I think perspective is part of what I'm going to talk about today, but
let me introduce you formally then. Could you please give a welcome to Eli Kulp, who's going to share his story.
Thank you so much for that. Let me get in my position here and figure this out. I'm excited. She mentioned perspective, and perspective is so important for all of us going through something like this. Without good perspective, you won't survive. Everybody can hear me okay? Yeah? Okay, great. All right, so as Angela said, I'm Eli Kulp. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you to the Lieberman family for putting this on. And a huge thanks to Angela. There's so many people in here that she's touched their lives in such incredible ways and invited me here. Before I get to the story, a little bit more background of who I am, so you know who you're listening to today. As Angela said, I'm a chef by trade. I'm a restaurant partner. I'm a podcaster. I'm a father. I'm someone whose life changed in a single moment, like many of you here. After moving out east from Seattle, Washington, I spent about a decade here in New York City training in some of the great kitchens here. Cooking is not just what I did, it's really who I am. I started at the age 14, and it really gave me purpose and identity in my life. But after a spinal cord injury like this, it rewrites everything. I'm here because I believe perspective and resilience are muscles, and like any muscle, they have to be used in order to get stronger. If you're sitting in this room as a patient, a family member, a caregiver, a nurse, you already know that. You've already been through that, right? So I'm going to talk a lot about resilience. I think resilience is such an important part of surviving something like this. People love to say it, but few people really, truly understand it. When you face a spinal cord injury, resilience is no longer an option. It really becomes your fuel. It's what carries you on when your body fights you, when your routines get complicated, when independence feels distant, when you are rebuilding your life from scratch, And it's exhausting from day to day all the time. Before an injury, we were already battling, problems in lives, right? Life doesn't wait to test you. But the reality of it is, you get hit with an injury like this, and suddenly resilience is no longer an option. It becomes part of who you are. It becomes part of your DNA, whether you like it or not. That's just the way it is. You face grief, identity loss. You face fear, moments when you don't feel like yourself anymore. Bladder routines, bowel routines, spasms at 3 a.m. keeping you awake, medical calls, skin checks, wheelchairs that die on you when you're not ready, the worst time. Caregiver schedules, and learning the simple things all over again. And listen, recovery isn't linear, right? Some days you feel like you're accomplishing things, and some days you feel like you got knocked back a peg or two, and you have to start over. But resilience shows up in every transfer, every therapy session, every moment when you want to give up, but you don't. And that's how strength is built in this world, right? Quietly, steadily, one day at a time, through hard work. Growing up, I had a great example of resilience in my father, a guy who had high school education, did some military work, and then decided to be a hippie. And he traveled around in his Volkswagen bus with his Doberman Pinscher named Stubby. Great dog, I hear, never met her. But anyways, fast forward a couple years later, he met my mother at a campground. She's Dutch. She was traveling around the world. Met her at a campground in Lake Tahoe. And then they put down roots in a very small town in Washington State called Mossy Rock. It's tucked in the foothills of the Cascades. 500 people in this town. We lived at the outer edge of it, down an old dusty road. I don't know if you know geography well, but in Washington State, we have the Cascade Mountain Range. We have Mount Rainier to our north, where I grew up, and we had Mount St. Helens to our south, about less than 40 miles away. And when Mount St. Helens did blow in the 1980, our house was covered with ash. And it was a little bit metaphoric when I think about it, because life explodes on you, it covers you with ash, and you have to dust off and rebuild. So a little bit more about my dad. He wasn't a big entrepreneur. He didn't climb the ladder through corporate success and show me how to operate businesses or anything like that. My dad was a laborer. He worked in the timber industry. He was a lumberjack. Worked in the logging business as far back as I can remember, risking life and limb to really put food on our table. And even though we grew up below the poverty line, I can tell you this, that we never, ever felt like we were suffering because of it. My mom, being a proud thrifty Dutch woman, they take it seriously to be thrifty. But she would make even make our clothes herself. And if anyone here has ever worn a homemade knitted sweater, that will build resilience in its own from the start. So that scratchy neck, oh man, forget about it. But anyways, no matter what, my dad would strap on those metal boots with the spikes and head out way before dawn, head up in the logging roads to earn his income. I saw many examples of how resilient this man was, but I remember vividly the time he received a call on the phone that said he was injured at work. He had slipped on a log while running a chainsaw, and he buried that chainsaw about halfway through his knee. But even though at that moment he knew, once again, he'd have to collect unemployment, in that industry it was you're only a bad weather away from collecting unemployment. He knew as soon as he was healed up, he'd be back out there, because not only his employer was dependent on him, but his family was, and he had to get us off that tasty government cheese. But no, seriously, that man was about as honest and resilient as they come. So what is resilience, right? Why am I up here talking about it? And why do people need to know about it? Because someone needs to remind you, right? A lot of you in here have been through it. You're already resilient, but sometimes you have to be reminded of it. You need some different perspective. Trauma forces perspective. That's reality, right? It gives us the ability to pause, to reflect, to see life in a new way. You learn what matters, you learn patience, humility, and you learn to celebrate the small things. This is why perspective really is a superpower. And with it, resilience becomes your armor. Those two things go hand in hand. According to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, resilience is the ability to recover or adjust easily to misfortune or change. It also says the capability of an object, a strained object, to recover after its size or shape has been deformed. So yes, resilience means toughness, elasticity, the ability to spring back from something traumatic. That is the textbook definition. However, in our world, it looks very different. We're not springing back to who we were before we were injured, because that person existed in a different body with a different path and the different assumptions about life. Instead, resilience becomes the ability to rebuild a whole new us from the foundation up, to wake up every day and relearn things that once seemed totally natural, to meet frustration, grief, fear, fatigue, and still find a way to move forward, even if forward looks nothing like what it used to look like. It means redefining what strength looks like, right? It means celebrating the accomplishments most people would never even understand. It means learning patience in moments where you just want to scream. It means allowing yourself to grieve while still choosing hope. Imagine that. I love that. When I thought about, I was like, that's a great way to think of it. We are not bouncing back. We are transforming once we're injured. We're shaping a new identity, a purpose, a new life path with depth, perspective, and a kind of strength that only comes from living through the unthinkable, and refusing to quit. That's what resilience truly is. A friend of mine, she's in Philadelphia, she's a great author. She studies resilience, that's like her thing. Dr. Taryn Staskow. She has a book called The 5 Practices of Highly Resilient People. In that, the line that I really loved was, resilience is not a special skill that you need to acquire. Resilience isn't something that you go out and find. By virtue of facing a challenge, resilience has already found you. I absolutely love that, because there's a very big chance that some of you out there are questioning if you're resilient or not. If you've endured challenges and setbacks in your life, and you reemerge better, more equipped, congratulations, because you are resilient. In 2015, High Street Hospitality Group, the company that I founded with my partner Ellen Yin, was absolutely on fire. From 2012 to 2015, we went from 1 restaurant to 4 restaurants, with a 5th one on the way. Our Philly restaurant, High Street on Market, was just named one of the best new restaurants by Bon Appetit magazine. I had the honor of a lifetime, something that I had worked tirelessly for, and I was named one of Food and Wine magazine's best new chefs. They do a list every year of the top 10 best new chefs in the country, and I was lucky to be one of them. The 5th and Pitney restaurant was going to be located in the West Village in New York, just a block from the meatpacking district. I was sort of coming back to New York after starting again in Philadelphia. In 2015, in March, we signed the lease on the new restaurant at Horatio Street. 3 months later in May, my injury occurred. We hadn't even took the paper off the windows yet. See, at that time, I was living in New York, perpetually walking a tightrope between the needs of my family, the needs of the restaurant, trying to continually operate these restaurants at a high level while conceptualizing, developing, and planning our next restaurant, much of which was done while I was commuting on the Amtrak train between Penn Station and 30th Street Station in Philly. On May 12th, 2015, I came down to Philly to cook a luncheon for some ladies who were a part of the Philadelphia Business Journal 40 under 40 class, something I was lucky enough to be a part of that year. And they had asked me to come down and do a lunch, and there was about 10 ladies. After sticking around after the lunch during service, I bailed out a little bit early, but I had to get back to New York. I lived on the Upper East Side at 94th and 1st. I had a CrossFit appointment. That morning, I was just starting CrossFit at 7 a.m., and I had to get back for it. So instead of taking the 11 p.m. train like I normally would, I jumped on the 9 o'clock train and headed towards New York City. After I boarded, I got comfortable. I found a nice spot in the front of the train in the quiet car, where the seats are facing each other, so I could stretch out. For whatever reason, that train was not packed that night. Usually that train would be totally packed, but it was really quiet, less than half full. Don't really know why, but in my mind, it was a bonus because I had a couple seats to myself. Soon after the northbound train started slowly getting out of the station, I got a text from a friend of mine, Nina. It was a picture of that she had taken 2 days earlier. The picture was me and my son standing against the chain link enclosed viewpoint at 97th and Park right over here. I actually just drove right by it, finding my parking garage. It was kind of bizarre. I was literally writing this, and then it was like, it took me right there. Anyways, Dylan had a daycare right there, and that's where the trains come in and out of the tunnel, right, from Grand Central. Anyways, the picture was in 2015. It was a beautiful afternoon. It was Mother's Day. We had just spent it in Central Park, and we were walking back, and we stopped. I'll say this, when we were standing there, he goes, "Daddy, I'm not afraid of trains anymore." And that was because he had developed this weird fear. He didn't like loud noises. And every time a train would go in and out and they see a little boy up there, they're going to, honk at him. So we used to do it. We stopped because he didn't like it anymore. And then that day, for whatever reason, we stopped. And he said, "Daddy, I'm not afraid of trains anymore." I was like, cool. Didn't think twice about it, right? So that's what I replied back to her, because that's what the quote was. At that moment we were standing there, he got over his fear, right? Well, I put the phone down, started to relax. 7 minutes later, as the train began to really speed up, and heading north on the tracks toward New York, unfortunately for the passengers on the train, we didn't know it was coming. As the engineer sped up, he thought he was entering a straight stretch, heading out of Philadelphia. But what he was doing, he was going 105 miles an hour into a 50-mile-an-hour curve. That sent the train off the tracks. It hit a giant concrete barrier that ripped through the car right in front of me like a hot knife through butter, killing 8 people and injuring over 200. It left me paralyzed from the neck down, laying on the rocks that smelled like hot oil and steel. I remember the moment very clearly. I knew exactly what happened because as that train left the track, it propelled me into the air. My neck hit the luggage rack squarely. And at that moment, it sent shockwaves and a sound through my body that I'll never forget. I laid under a pile of rubble, tried to move, nothing moved. So I knew exactly what had happened. My first thought was, how am I going to cook? How am I going to do my job as a chef? But very quickly it went to, how am I going to be a father, right? A husband? How am I going to throw the ball with my son like I envisioned? How was I going to be the father that I always wanted to be to him? Fast forward 2 years and doing a lot of work with our beloved Angela Riccobona right here. I started to finally shake the funk off. I had to pull myself up by the old proverbial bootstraps and say, enough feeling sorry for myself, enough of this depression, anxiety, sadness, and grief. After not only losing my mobility and my independence, I was going through a really challenging divorce. one that I had to fight for every single minute that I could spend with my son because she was not having it. But because just like my father did for me, I needed to show Dylan what resilience looks like. So one day, I should say, he has the fortitude, the resilience, no matter how hard obstacles come his way, the challenges, he will see an example of how to face those head on. In 2017, we decided to make Philadelphia our permanent home for our son. We moved down, separated. This allowed me to get back in touch with the restaurants that were in Philadelphia. We had the one up in New York, but the ones in Philadelphia I hadn't really been involved with as much because I hadn't been down there as much. But I realized very quickly that these chefs had matured, the ones I hired and trained, and they didn't really need me for all the work because they were doing it themselves. It kind of felt like I was trying to force a round peg into a square hole. And then I realized, you know what? I got to figure out something else. So here I was, a chef of 5 restaurants really, but not really knowing where I fit in exactly. I felt like it was necessary to push myself in a new direction and find that new purpose. As I was searching, I came across the idea of a podcast. A friend of mine recently opened a studio and he said, "What do you think?" So I immediately reached out to local chef friends because I wanted to create a place where the next generation of chefs can hear the stories of resilience, toughness, and the sacrifices it takes to succeed in our industry. So in April 2020, I launched the Chef Radio podcast. Since then, I've been able to connect and interview some of the leading chefs in America and even outside the States, with over 100 episodes and counting. Since then, I was able to launch another podcast that's focused solely on the Philadelphia food scene. That one's called Delicious City Philly. So there's 2 podcasts that I operate now. We also founded the first ever, through Delicious City, we founded the first ever Chef and Restaurant Awards for Philadelphia. It's a night where the entire chef and restaurant community now come together every year to celebrate each other. We've also created other events that bring community together over shared passion over food and camaraderie. Our latest event, called Hoagie Throwdown, was an event where we paired over 20 different chefs, delis, and hoagie makers for an ultimate title of Philadelphia's best hoagie. If you don't know Philadelphia's hoagies, don't call them a sub. They're hoagies. They will fight you over that. We actually paired up local independent wrestlers. So it was a full-on wrestling ring happening while people were shoving hoagies in their mouth. It was amazing to see, but it's amazing to see the impact of these events and how it brings community together. And no matter what your difference is, you're coming together over a common love for food. So to wrap this all up, if you've ever wondered whether you're resilient, just remember what Dr. Taryn said. Resilience isn't something you go out and find, because by virtue of facing challenges, resilience has already found you. As people, we've gone through the unimaginable. It's important to stop every once in a while and think about the challenges that you've overcome to maintain a healthy outlook and perspective on life. So congratulations, everybody. You're resilient. I hope that wasn't boring.
That was like so not boring. That was actually really, really powerful.
Thank you.
And, like knowing you from the beginning, being able to hear your story and seeing how far you've come and actually seeing you smile, like there was a time that wasn't happening. So I'm really, really proud of you for all you've done. And I can't thank you enough for coming here. Like he drove all the way from Philadelphia today and he's driving all the way back tonight.
It's not that far.
It is far.
It's an hour
it is far.
Hour and 45 minutes.
It is far.
What's funny is when I was here in New York and I got a call from a recruiter and said, "Hey, a woman in Philly wants to talk to you about, is looking for a chef." He goes, "Have you ever thought about Philly?" I was like, "No, never." Like literally, I'd never thought about Philly. 10 years of being in New York, I never went to it. I thought it was 4 or 5 hours away. That's in my mind it was. Then I realized that it wasn't. But it was amazing driving up here, and we did the loop around here trying to find parking, which took forever, and then found a garage over on 97th on the other side of Park, and driving literally right past the spot where that picture was taken, with Dylan. I'm holding Dylan up on the chain link fence as he's looking over. I was like, well, I think that was meant to be that parking garage way over there. Yeah. And then even rolling back through here and coming down the crooked ass sidewalks, leading right by the hospital here, it was really, it hit me. When I used to be coming on those sidewalks, I lived at, on First Avenue, I was not happy. That was a really bad part of my life, coming here to your office to do different sessions or rehab, PT. That was a different me, and I wasn't ready for that today, to feel that again, because I could feel the sadness of those days coming here, just to kind of work, whether it's physically or mentally. You guys all know that feeling. I don't need to talk to you guys about it. So.
I also know that there are people here in the audience that it's very new right now, and they're feeling that darkness and that sadness. But hearing your story, I do believe it gives them hope that there is a path forward, and this belief in something called resilience, which in the beginning nobody feels like they have.
No, I mean, seriously, it is like I said, it's a muscle. You have to use it. You have to build it. We take, everybody here that's, upright, you take your independence for granted. It's something you don't think about, and you shouldn't. It's not natural to think every day like, wow, I could be in a wheelchair. That wouldn't really make sense. But when you have to live it every day and you're thrust into this. I remember the first time for my bowel routine, they're like, all right, we're gonna do digital stimulation. I was like, digital? I'm thinking like, okay, so it must be something like a calculator. I had a digital, right? And they're like, no, it's gonna be a finger. I'm like, what? You're doing what to me? Yeah. Like those moments, like that sticks with you, right? But like all things, your mind switches. I remember, you probably tell this to a lot of people you've worked with over the years. You said it takes about 5 years, to kind of get your life in order after an injury like that. And when you're first injured, 5 years is like, oh my God, 5 years. It really is an eternity. But of course, time flies, and before you know it, I'm a decade in this year. So it really is like that 5-year mark where you've grieved everything you can grieve. I always tell people this all the time, like, and you guys probably remember this, like after you're newly injured, you grieve every single thing you can't do anymore. Like everything, whether it's the store you used to bop into to get your egg and cheese, right? Or, just getting out of a car so easily, like all those little stupid things. You have to grieve them, and sometimes it takes multiple times to go through that process. But eventually your brain shifts. Eventually your brain makes a shift. Your brain is a really incredible thing where, just that repetitive exposure eventually allows your brain to, make that change, flip that switch.
If it's okay with you, we'd like to open up to some Q&A from the audience.
Sure.
Okay.
Don't be bashful.
Yeah, don't be bashful. You can ask them anything.
This is not a question. First of all, your speech was wonderful.
Thank you.
Nancy lived as a quad for 16 years. During those years, we went on safari in Africa. We went to the Galapagos. We went to Brazil. We went to China. The words "I can't" just were not part of her vocabulary. I also went to school in Philadelphia at Penn. and then know about hoagies.
Yeah, hoagies are they're the sandwich culture is funny. When I came out from Seattle, I pictured Italian delicatessens on every corner, like soprano guys just sitting there like slicing your, I got here and I was like, all right, so they're not Italian, they're bodegas, and you can get your chopped cheese or your boar's head on stale bread, like very uninspired. But when I went to Philadelphia, I was quickly exposed. Some people were nice enough to take me on like a sandwich tour of South Philadelphia. If you've never been there, it's South Philadelphia doesn't want to change, and it's not going to change, and they still have that old school mentality of the Italian delicatessens, the proud ones that have been there for hundreds of years, not hundreds maybe, but decades. Some from the early 1900s, and I just really fell in love with their love for it. And High Street, at its core, the second restaurant we opened was an all-day cafe, and sandwiches were at the core of its menu, whether breakfast sandwiches in the morning, more like chefed-up versions of them. The one that I fell in love with, and I'm not a cheesesteak guy, I really am not. They've gotten better over the years, but they also are very uninspired, and you actually have to ask for them to put salt and pepper on it. So if you don't, it's not the best experience. But anyways, they had a sandwich down there called the roast pork with broccoli rabe and provolone. And when I had that sandwich the first time, that was a life changer. I'd never seen it before. And I truly call that the real sandwich of Philadelphia. So, yeah.
How you doing, Eli?
Hi, how are you?
You said something about like your son, right? And I wanted to ask you your something like, how do you feel like, or what would you give to somebody who a father as well, and like kind of dealing with this area of resilience, being a father and fighting for that area of fatherhood, and like it not being so peachy with like your son's mother, and how to kind of get through that and grow through that. I myself a father, and it is difficult. I want to know it.
Yeah, for sure. It was a scary time. This injury doesn't just affect you, right? It affects everybody in your life. There's a lot of stories like mine where relationships don't survive the trauma, and if you have children in the middle of it, and it gets a little sticky, it's definitely a challenge. How to deal with it, I think it's just a matter of just being patient, understanding on both sides that you try to get you have the best intentions for that child. I think where it was scary for Dylan's mom was the fact that if she's not there, there's going to be someone else taking care of him, right? I can understand that fear, and thankfully I'm able to hire great people. I have Alicia with me right here, who's been with me for 7 years now. I've been lucky to find great people that really, I feel great about having them around Dylan. But yeah, I think every challenge is going to be unique in that sense. But I think just understanding that time will kind of heal that a little bit as well, just like it heals our minds a little bit. I think I've seen that over the years, a lot of that fear has subsided, and it just you're kind of working through it together. But sometimes if there's a lot of contention there, it can feel like you're working against each other a little bit. But I think over the years, and as he's gotten older, that stress and that fear has really subsided to where there's a lot more trust there across the board. I don't know if that helps you or answers your question, but that's my experience at least. It helped that she had a couple more kids, and that took the attention. So, anyways, no, she's a great mom, and I don't want to sit here and sound like she's not, because that's not it at all. I think like I said, these injuries affect everyone in your life, and you really figure out who are the ones that are with you and who are the ones that are not going to be with you, whether it's friends, family, etc. You find that pretty quickly.
Thanks for that powerful speech, Eli. So is there anything you would go back and change about, your injury or the day you were injured or something along those lines?
You know, I actually read something recently where someone was asked who was injured very young, actually, as a child, would they go back and change that if they had the opportunity? And they answered no. And they were injured young, and the answer, of course, was because this person had, turned their life into an example of resilience, and they had, the people they met, the places they have gone, they've used this as an opportunity, a springboard to help others, and they said no. And I found that very interesting. And of course, would I change it? Yes, I would. I think my honest answer is that. However, knowing how much fun I'm having in life right now versus how much stress and pressure I was in that other capacity, and not knowing, you never know how it's going to work out. The New York restaurant that we opened and I was injured, just months after we signed the lease, that restaurant had a very hard time. We had to scramble and bring chefs from Philly, and then our Philadelphia restaurants were really struggling for a couple of years because we took a lot of the talent out of Philly. And that was really heartbreaking because that was a dream coming back to New York, and not being able to fix those issues like I wanted, because I was going through rehab at that time. I was like in my hospital bed weeks after I got injured. We were still working on the plans for the new restaurant, which is amazing, right? You have something to distract you, but that restaurant, coming back to New York, and we had big plans of opening more here, but that really put the brakes on that. So I think that was really hard for me to get through. But seeing what I do now, I feel like that same passion that I had for food and what I'm doing now is equal. So it's not an easy answer.
I got you.
You know what I mean? Yes, I probably would go back and change that day. However, knowing what I know now and how it's changed me, because I still get to work with the chefs. I'm still in the meetings. I'm still working with them on menu items. I'm just not in the kitchen. You know what I mean? So I still have one foot in that, but I also have this other sort of sandbox that I'm working with now and playing in. So, I guess that's my long answer to that
Question.
Yeah,
I like
sure.
it.
How about you? How would you?
Oh,
So I
wow.
was injured pretty young. I was injured at 17 years old. Now, would I go back and change it? I don't know. I wouldn't say yes, only because my aspiration was to be a football player, but I'm still an athlete. So I still have that competitive aspect, that fulfillment there. And I think the fulfillment I also get from helping others, because as the outreach coordinator here at Mount Sinai for spinal cord injury, I meet newly injured and incredible people each and every day. And the joy they get, by the time they complete their acute rehab of just being around me and me coming and checking on them each and every day, helping them through what they're going through, it actually helps me, So probably no. My answer would be no. It's just life, and you got to go with life sometimes and roll with the punches.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Got it.
Those days it was pretty tough neighborhood.
Sure.
But yeah, it is what it is.
Now it's all gentrified.
Yeah, now it's kind of corny. But yeah.
Hey Eli, how are you? Victor Khaleesi here. Good to
What's up,
see you,
dude?
man. How you doing?
How are you?
I'm well.
I'm
So
glad thanks for coming, bro.
yeah, man. I remember 10 years ago you said you're in this, right?
Yeah.
And I remember coming one of those transition classes and looking at you and told you do some great things. And you know, you're a father, you're a chef, you're a podcast. Pretty impressive.
Thanks.
And I had the opportunity to hit High Street on Hudson. Loved it. You nailed the bread. Talking about those restaurants that you go to in New York City, you know, those are the ones that I grew up in. So when I was there, that kind of brought me back. And certainly having that pork and broccoli rabe sandwich was really good. So
we did bring it to New York, yes.
you know, you come to my mom's house, you'll get that.
Okay.
But you know, you've done so much, right? In those 10 years and hearing that trajectory of here at Sinai and, you know, those sad points and then bringing that back. But one thing that you just said, what was really interesting to me was how you're having fun now. Yeah. Now, can you explain what that fun is and what that means? Because I've seen you through the whole thing, right? In a lot of different ways. And it's really nice to hear that. And I'd love to hear what your fun is.
Yeah, you know, people, you know, as chefs, especially working in fine dining and you know, highly ambitious kitchens and you know, having high expectations for your own career, the fun is being in the shit. You know what I mean? Like that's fun for us, right? That stress, we kind of thrive off of that. And so when, you know, fast forward to today, I think it was around the time, about the 5-year mark or so, I just decided that if it wasn't fun, I didn't want to do it anymore. I didn't, you know, and you know, that's part of when I transitioned out of being in the day-to-day of the restaurants, because it wasn't fun anymore. Like, as somebody in a wheelchair, you know, thankfully all of our restaurants at the time were already accessible, 100% accessible actually, which was, you know, and it's amazing when you think about that, because I could have easily been up 6 steps, and I wouldn't have had access to them. But even with that being said, restaurants aren't really made or built, especially kitchens. Kitchens, you know, you're the last thing that gets put in on the drawing, right? Because, you know, that's the least square footage you're going to have. So being in a kitchen for me is just being in the way, you know, and it was, I'm constantly moving, chef, you know, and you kind of moving around, bouncing around, just people walking around you. And eventually that kind of wears you out, and it wasn't fun anymore. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I made in late 2019, around September 2019, I told my partner, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I need to go figure it out. I had other plans that involved, you know, putting quality food in low-income neighborhoods around Philadelphia. And then the pandemic hit, and it was just, that plan was just gone. Like, there was no chance I was going to convince other high-quality restaurants to serve food in underserved neighborhoods at that time. And I was fortunate enough that somebody that I knew, a friend, built a podcast studio and showed it to me one day. And, you know, that really just, that small interaction changed my life, so.
So as a chef, you obviously, it's a very physical job, right?
Yeah.
And it sounds like you were already kind of making this transition to more of an organizational, kind of using more of this, less of
Yes,
the brute force.
for sure.
Do you have any advice for someone who's had an injury and they've had a very physical identity their whole life, and now they're kind of pushed into this unknown territory where they have to really rely on other skills or other kind of identities? Like, how would you, maybe any advice for building like that part of themselves?
Sure, yeah. You know, there's plenty of jobs that are out there that being in a wheelchair doesn't really affect, right? That you can kind of go back to. It might be different. Maybe you're not as quick on a keyboard, so to speak, if you have quadriplegia. But there's plenty of jobs you can still have a great impact. I think of what Nancy did, right? In law, she got right back into it. She didn't hardly, I think some of her first, Angela told me, like, it wasn't about, how long she's gonna be in the hospital. It's how quickly can she get back at her desk and get back working with her clients again. So there's definitely positions out there that don't rely on that. But if you are a construction worker, right, a laborer, and you loved what you did, it's really hard to figure that out. I will say this, I am very fortunate that the restaurant community supported me after I was injured, like incredibly supported me. They really came out, they helped raise money for us to get through that transition period after newly injured, as you're going through all the insurance and the settlements and all of that. It takes years for that stuff to happen, so you really need that kind of bridge, and people really stepped up during that time. And also, after when I decided to start the podcast, it just took a few phone calls and text messages of local chefs and friends of mine to say yes to get it going, right? So I will say that, my position afforded me that luxury. I think something like, podcasting as an example, it's a very low bar of entry, right? And whatever your passion is, gaming, talking about, resilience and healing, those type of things people want to hear, right? So it's just finding something like that, something that you take your expertise that maybe you had and you transition them into something new or different that gets you excited and wants to get you out of bed every morning. And there's plenty of organizations I know, like Natalia, you work with a great organization and changing people's lives for the better. But being injured is, complicated, right? Like, how do you get your needs met with your, Medicaid and Medicare, but you can't have a position that pays you over a certain amount of money, right? Like, it's a very tricky life we live. And, finding some little, I always say that it just takes a spark. It just takes a spark, right, to get something going, to start a fire in you. So if you just find that little spark can change your life.
We have another question.
Just a simple question. Being the chef that you are, what would be your go-to meal when you're on the first date with a woman?
Well, you get spaghetti, right? You share a bowl of spaghetti. Make sure you got the long stuff, right? No, you meet in the middle. I would say this, that a nice little neighborhood Italian restaurant, some little red wine, like, what's his name said? Billy Joel, right? Some spaghetti or some pasta. You can't beat it. Everybody loves pasta. Everybody loves pasta, and it feeds the soul. You know what I mean? That's a food that feeds the soul. It doesn't just feed your belly. It's the first 3 restaurants I worked in New York, the first 3 years I was here, one was a restaurant in Midtown called Oceana, 53rd between Park and Lex. It's really my internship. I worked for a chef that was American. He's from the Bronx, Irish Catholic, redhead, just absolute maniac of a chef, who had trained in French restaurants, including Danielle. He recently left Danielle just to become the chef. This was his first restaurant. So the intensity I walked into was just at a level that would just kind of blow your mind. Like all the typical crazy chef vibes were all there. Then after that, I worked for another French chef called Laurent Torrendel. The chef de cuisine, the chef that was running the restaurant, because he had multiple restaurants, was this Belgian maniac, Mathieu. And then the next restaurant I worked at was a American restaurant or Italian restaurant, but the chef was French trained, and he was, all the cliches out there. So then a friend of mine named Mario Carbone, who was helping to do some pasta at this Italian restaurant because the chef was French trained. He had no idea how to make pasta, and he was masquerading as an Italian chef. Well, that restaurant got a 1-star review by the New York Times, and just completely outed his inability to cook true Italian food. So I went to Mario Carbone was working at a restaurant downtown called Del Posto. It was considered the highest end of all Italian restaurants, the first 4-star Italian restaurant in the history, or in New York, in over like 30 years or something like that. All the trappings of a fine dining restaurant, but Italian. And I kind of, after working there for a while, I learned that you can't cook good Italian food angry. Like it's soul, right? French food, you can be pissed as fuck. and you're gonna do just fine. You know what I mean? You get that carrot, you're like, how can I manipulate this carrot to fit what I want, the shape of the plate? I want this thing to be, perfectly peeled and shaped and cut into this, exact, because it has to go with my perfectly shaped, quail, and you manipulate the food to fit your vision. Italian food, you look at the food, you're like, how can I manipulate myself to fit this food? I think I coined that term. You can't cook good Italian food angry. And I believe in that. And ever since I worked in that restaurant, that has been how I think of food. It's just a different way of thinking. And pasta is really, it's like a window into the soul. So definitely go with that.
If you're comfortable doing so, can you talk about ways or moments that you've showed up as a father that maybe 2015 you thought wouldn't be possible?
I'll be completely honest with you. The one thing that has been the biggest challenge for me is figuring out how to connect with a son who's very physical. Dylan he's very gifted academically. He's a self-starter. He's gifted athletically. He's a great soccer player. Plays all the different sports, which, as a father, as somebody who also plays sports, like, for me, that's very fulfilling. But boys connect, I've learned, not through like, hey, let's go sit down and have a chat. And you think about growing up, like you roll your eyes every time you hear that from your mom or dad, right? So I will say that connecting with a boy specifically who plays sports, is very physical, you really connect with them through that physicality. Throwing the ball is a perfect example, right? As somebody who is a quadriplegic, like those are challenges that I still haven't cracked the code on that. But I will say though, where I think the success is just showing him by example of how to live. I think this injury makes you more empathetic. It makes you it humbles you in the best ways possible. It makes you more kind, more thoughtful. I think while I wasn't a complete, jerk before I got injured, and those are things that were important to me, I think those are the lessons that he's going to take with him the rest of his life, and those are more important than throwing the ball, right? Like those are things we want to do. Like what we all know, the the high school star athlete that lives in that world the rest of his life probably isn't going to be the most fulfilled individual, right? It's more about those core aspects of who you are as a human that will make you the most successful. I don't know if you ever saw Napoleon Dynamite and Uncle Rico that still lives in, still can't get over being the star athlete. But we all know those guys, right? So I think in the long run, just me showing up in his life every day and showing who I am and what you can still do as a person, with a catastrophic injury, lifelong injury. Those are the lessons, even if they're not spoken, they are by far anything that more powerful than anything I would have been able to just try to teach him verbally, right? It's the actions, not the words.
So as a quad, I know you communicate a lot of directions to others. If there's a particular meal do you like communicate that to someone on how to make it?
Oh yeah, for sure. When I cook dinner, it's like 2 hours long. It's like every pot in the house is going to get used. So yes, and it's a true joy to be able to teach people. I have a young lady that worked for me for about 6 years. She was like sort of a naturally gifted cook. She was a home cook, but she grew up in a Israeli home, and food was very center in their lives. And so Esther, her name is, we would cook a ton. She kind of had like the rough ability to cook as like a home cook, but she really loved to learn from like the professional side of it, right? So I worked with her a lot. She would even work in the kitchens at the restaurant time to time. She'd do events with us, stuff like that. And now, she's a house manager for a couple, and now she's been introduced to their friends, and she's flying around the country cooking food for different, dinner parties and events and things like that. And she's not really a private chef, but she has that skill set. So it's cool to see how, even though it was sort of a unintentional side effect, how it's allowed her more opportunity as well in her career.
Hi, Eli. That was a fantastic speech, by the way. It wasn't boring at all. I think that leads into my question in that I should probably say I met Eli when Angela asked me to come. She's like, "Oh, we got another person that's a chef." And it was really freaky at the time because I was working part-time in Philly and in New York.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I kind of forgot about that.
This is super weird. But then I met you and I was like, this guy doesn't need my help. You were, and it was still early on, but you were still just so vulnerable and open that I knew that you would be okay, because that's a huge part in the healing. And we just spoke about that being the bridge to getting over grief or grieving. So I used to be a chef. And I loved it, like you said, and I loved the worst parts of it.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was so heartbreaking to not be able to do that. And I didn't want to cook at home. I didn't want to get back into cooking. I didn't want to do recipe writing.
Yeah.
And I still don't. It's still as heartbreaking. Like, I still want to cry. It's still as heartbreaking as it ever was. I don't want to cook. I don't want to teach people how to cook. But I know that when I do cook, it's way better when I direct.
Oh, yes.
But then I get so frustrated. I'm like, please just get the knife cut right. Just the tiniest thing. So I don't know. I know you're looking
Alicia's
over there.
laughing
She probably
over
gives
there.
you hell. I know. No, I wish I could adjust better. But I guess that's my question. Like, I want to get over the heartbreak.
Yeah.
I really do. So how did you? I've respected you so much for being able to get back into it.
I was the same way with you. When my injury took place, I think a lot of people want to blame something. You want to find the reason, even if it was, just wrong place, wrong time. You want to find a reason for it, And for me, I blamed my ambition. I really did. I really felt that, here I wasn't satisfied just cooking in Philly. I wanted to open a restaurant in New York. I wanted to expand, continue to challenge myself, not just as a chef, but then you challenge yourself as a leader, right? We always say in the industry, the more restaurants you have, the further the further you get away from the stove. And it's very true, because double your restaurants, double your problems. That's just it. It's simple math. More pipes are going to break, more grease traps are going to overflow, more people are going to call out. So you're just putting out more fires. So it takes you kind of away from that. With me, after I got injured, I was the same way. I really didn't even want to be in the restaurant. Here there was this restaurant that was a dream, and then it turned into a nightmare, right? So just being in that restaurant, I had to be there. I had to show up. We had investors that, gave us money to open these restaurants. We had the responsibility. But it took me 3-4 years to really start embracing the creative side of it. For me, it's always about the creative side that really juiced me up. So I don't know what unlocked that for me. I think it just like grief, for me, it was something that eventually became more tolerable. I'm sad to hear that that's still, because it takes me back to those days, where I can totally feel that pain. I remember when I got back to New York, did my rehab in Atlanta, and I got back to New York, and I'm sitting there watching daytime TV, like, all the shows that are on daytime TV, and every commercial is like, if you have a disability, blah, blah, attorneys, and I'm thinking like, here I am sitting at home with all these people that don't have jobs as well, watching daytime TV, and I was so pissed. I was so pissed, because that's not who I ever was, right? So there was all these like kind of grief and anger wrapped up into that, and but I don't know what flipped the switch, but I know that it took a while for me to get over it specifically. I think it's just doing it. I know the frustration too, like hold the knife this way, no that way, no this way, turn it. Like try to explain it. Like try it at home someday with somebody. Like try to explain how to hold the knife the way you want it and to get the cut that you want. It's really frustrating. It teaches you patience. That's for damn sure. But if I want to get it done, I have to be patient. That's all there is to it.
I would like to know, how were you able to, because you said this affects everyone around you, right? So how were you able to build that bridge or that connection with those around you to be there for them emotionally while you were still healing yourself? Because I have a lot of trouble with that, because I want to save everybody and fix their life, but I need to, put on my mask first. So how do you deal with that?
Well, the reality of it is you can't fix people or, before you're fixed. Like, it's just not possible. Like, you have to be able to kind of handle your own business first. I had family and friends flying out from the West Coast, and to see them, putting everything on the back burner to get through those 6 months that I was in the hospital was incredibly hard, because that the stress that they're going through, and you feel that you're responsible for it. You understand why they're there. You understand, like, you would be there as well if it was your child, but at the same time, you're inconveniencing people, so to speak, right? They're having to change their life because of a decision you made to get on that train or in that car or, whatever your injury was. So that was incredibly difficult for me as well. But, I think having great support, like great psychologist, I had one in Atlanta that really helped me, and family, you kind of get your whole family involved in that healing process. At least that's how it went for me. So, but I can understand what you're saying, where, you want to help the people around you that are also there for you. But for me, I kind of had to just get over that fact that, I needed to work on me before I could get help other people. So.
The question is, like, there's a lot of focus on mental health, and a lot of people get hurt and don't go through it. But I think all of us have a common thread here, and that's Angela. And how important was she to your life?
Oh my God! Yeah, let's give it up.
Let's go. Yeah.
I mean, ridiculously important. I can't really overstate it. I use her name a lot when people ask me similar questions. And that's why I was happy to do this, because what Angela did, she gave me examples, right? She said, look at this picture of this guy with his, got married after he was hurt. This guy couldn't leave his house because his bowels were unpredictable, right? But he still found it, right? Like, look at this picture of this father over here with his, like, those are, you got to have examples, right? And that's why we have to show up, the ones that have gone through the fire. We have to show up, because the ones that are newly injured, that are still struggling with those answers, those questions, you need examples of people who have done it to show you. And that I think was one really important part of what Angela did for me. And she obviously cares tremendously as well, so that goes a long way. So thank you, Angela.
There you go, Mark.
No, Eli, I just want to give you and everyone in the room a sense of Nancy's resilience. At one point, she came to me and said, I want to go to India. Do you want to come?
And
I
you said,
I have no interest in going to India. So Nancy said to me, I will take Coral, her caregiver, and we'll go to India. And they did. For 2 weeks. They went to India.
Everything possible.
And she came back with a picture of her riding a camel in India with a guy behind her holding her on because she had no body strength. That's resilient.
Hell yes. Hell yes.
So can we please just thank Eli for being the amazing man he is?
Thank you.